Here we go.
Good morning. Welcome to Coffee with the Coach. We're glad to have you here. It's a beautiful day on the mountain. Without further ado, we will have Mark Webb give us a few remarks, and then he will introduce our Vice-Chancellor to talk to us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. It's always good to be here. Welcome, everybody. Have such a great crowd today. And I regret I wasn't here last week, and I appreciate Dickie being here. I think, although part of that was to my expense when he was talking about the trip that didn't happen to St. Scholastica. We had a weekend of sports, a lot of activity in athletics. We're back at it. We did certainly have some issues in Lexington, Virginia, and one of the highlight, I think, was the tie the men's soccer team had at Brevard, and the women's cross-country team did well on Saturday. But just to tell you kind of how my Saturday went, the football had a text from Travis about 10:30 that night. The bus broke down south of Knoxville. Fortunately, the men's soccer team was detained, so the men's soccer team could pick up half the football team to get back to Sewanee at a reasonable hour. And I'm sure those players will remember that trip for the next 30 years, although there wasn't much social distancing on the bus as we tried to put them in there. So but anyhow, we have a game this Saturday against Westminster College, and we have soccer and field hockey and volleyball. We've had some teams off to a real good start. Women's soccer started off undefeated. Field hockey they play Saturday and Sunday. And men's soccer is, while they've had some early injuries, they are back and they're coming strong. Nancy Muller has had a great start to volleyball, and she had a tough weekend with volleyball, but she will be back in action this weekend with the volleyball team, and I look forward to a lot of success with it. It's some of the best volleyball I've seen in the gym in years. So that's where we are. Sorry I wasn't here last week. Glad I'm here today. But the special guest today, it's always a great pleasure when the Vice-Chancellor comes to talk about athletics. He has been a fan of athletics since his arrival. He has been supportive of our coaches. He's had them to Chin Hall. But most of all, there are many things, but most of all, he has made the offer, which obviously our coaches being competitive take him up on that. Whenever there is a blue chip recruit who we want to go after, if they're admissible, he will make that call for them. And I think to date he's hitting about 1,000, pretty close to that in recruiting, so we appreciate that offer. Our Vice-Chancellor, Reuben Brigety. Dr. Brigety.
Thank you very much.
Oh, I just was talking.
Yeah.
Y'all got to remember, this is his first coffee with the coach with the audience, so he's a little confused.
That's right. We have some delivery that needs to go that way. So live TV, folks.
Right, we're live.
Right. So good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody. I'm speaking. I'll kind of go back and forth between the crowd and to the camera here. So I'm delighted to be here with Coffee with the Coach. This is my second time appearing in Coffee with the Coach. I was here around this time last year, I believe. And last year, obviously, was a tremendous challenge for all of us in the Sewanee community, particularly for our athletes, because of the extraordinary measures that we had to take in order to keep everybody in this community safe. That said, this year looks very different. It looks very much closer to a more traditional year, thanks to the vaccines, yay science, which are both a godsend and a miracle. The efficacies of these vaccines are really extraordinary. If you are vaccinated, your chances of having a breakthrough infection are about 1 in 5,000. So you are 47 times more likely to die in a car accident than you are to have a breakthrough infection if you are vaccinated. If you are vaccinated and under the age of 65, you are 3 times more likely to be struck by lightning at some point over an 80-year lifespan than you are to require hospitalization. This is extraordinary. It is a game changer. And because of the efficacy of these vaccines, when the Pfizer vaccine was given full FDA approval a few weeks ago, we mandated it for all faculty, staff, and students here on the domain. As of today, we are approaching 95% compliance for both our faculty and our staff. I'm sorry, for both our faculty and our students. Our staff are around 60%. But what this means is that this now gives us the freedom to be able to compete in athletics with a high degree of confidence that our athletes, our athletic staff, and our community will be safe. And so, so the only thing we have to worry about now is our performance on the athletic field. That's right. Which is extraordinary. So long as the vaccines hold, as long as the data continues to tell us we're safe, we'll continue to monitor. So as I said last year, I am a huge fan of collegiate athletics for a variety of reasons. One, I think for the individual athletes, it gives them not only an outlet for their particular athletic passions, it creates a whole other set of family for those athletic teams, and it teaches you things on the athletic fields that are frankly harder to learn anyplace else. So, as you know, I went to the United States Naval Academy where everybody was required to be an athlete. I was a fencer, I fenced in a collegiate level. And at Annapolis, the reason you do athletics is not only because of all the reasons we do them here, or not only because it keeps you healthy, but because it teaches you the will to win, which is applicable in combat, applicable in all other forms of life. And so I am a huge supporter of our athletic programs and look forward to personally getting out over the course of this weekend to see football, to see field hockey. I've actually never seen a field hockey match in person. So I'm actually really excited about that, and hopefully to see some soccer and to go cheer our various athletic teams to victory. So, is that good enough intro? So analysis work. Q&A from you all from the audience.
Yeah, we'll take some questions from the audience here.
And I have a ringer with me, so as I said, if anybody questions me about what was the win-loss record of our rugby team in 1922, something that all vice-chancellors are supposed to know, I'm going to let Mark Webb ask those levels of specificity, but I will certainly answer all questions to the best of my ability.
I can make a comment. Having a location where students frequent and to be over 21 to have an adult beverage, but for the food, the morale of the students, particularly we employ 6 students and 3 of them are athletics, and 2 of them are on the volleyball team. I just wanted to let you know that it seems like there was a round of testing even that you had scheduled. We've done so well that you actually pulled back on. Is that correct?
Yeah, so first of all, I'm thrilled that the morale and mental health of our students is much better. And quite frankly, and this actually goes to answering a bit of your comment, Jimmy. So there is still the presence of this virus in our community. There are always viruses, viri, that are constantly circulating. The question is the extent to which we all have kind of natural immunity to them and how they actually impact us. And so last year, our strategy was to crush the curve. There are only 25 ICU beds within a 50-mile radius of where we're sitting right now. Right. So we simply could not allow the virus to take hold. We had to take extraordinary, even draconian measures in order to do that last year. This year, the vaccines, as I mentioned, are so good that what we're tracking now is not the spread of the virus. What we are much more concerned about is the impact of the contraction of the virus. Right. So if we start to see vaccinated people, particularly vaccinated young people, hospitalized, that is then a break glass emergency moment. But thus far, the data suggests we don't have to do that. So therefore, if we are not concerned as much about the spread of the virus, because we know that we are essentially inoculated against it, then the question is, why would you test? And then why would you take all the other extraordinary measures like quarantining and contact tracing and isolation? Because those are not benign interventions. All of those things cost us dramatic effort on behalf of the staff that actually have to implement them, notwithstanding the actual cost. We spent $10 million last year on our COVID response overall. Not a dime of which was passed on to our students or their families. And so where we are right now is doing the risk calculus to ask ourselves, to what extent are any of these other interventions necessary relative to the risk of having an adverse impact if you contract the virus. And so, we have had students that have tested positive, about 3% or so. Not a one of them has had to require any medical intervention. We have had thus far no transmission of the virus between faculty and students. We had 0 last year. And so this tells us now that if you get the virus, this now looks like, for the most part, an individually manageable medical event, not unlike any other individually manageable medical event that we would have in non-pandemic times, which leads to better morale. Bill.
Vice-Chancellor, tell us about your recruitment calls. What do you say to the students? What success have you had in
Sure.
calling?
Well, in full disclosure, I'm not batting 1,000. But I would say probably 850, I think, is probably reasonable, right?
We'll take it.
Right. And so, first of all, as I mentioned, I've told all the coaches if there's any particular athlete that they want, that we should, I'm happy to talk with them. And then I do for about 20, 30, 40 minutes. And I'll ask them, obviously, about their athletic talents, but I'm also very interested in the kind of person they want to be. What do they want? I ask them the same question. You are now 18 years old. What do you want your life to look like when you're 30? And then, based on what they say, I want to work in this kind of field, or I want to have this kind of family life, or I'm interested in having this kind of impact on society. We talk a little bit about how Sewanee, beyond athletics, can help them get there. Then I tell them, and it's true, that I will be personally invested in their development to be a person of character and consequence. And the last thing I'll say is this. I'm going to give you some homework. I want you to call the president of every other college that you are considering. Not the coach, not the head of the athletic department, no disrespect, not any other professors, the president personally, and see if she or he will talk with you for 30 or 40 minutes and give you their personal guarantee that they will be invested in your future. You see what happens. And based on that, let that factor into your decision about the most important choice you're going to make in your young adult life about where you want to spend your years. And I hope you'll decide to spend it in school.
Good skill.
You would have had me at hello.
But I will say, there were 1 or 2 recruits who had made their decision, and then before I got the call, and then I said, the Vice Chancellor would like to talk to you, right? And the one young lady said, oh, no, thank you very much, I'm going to go to W&L instead. I'm like, hey, hold on a minute. I'm going to respect your decision, but the way these things work in real life is you take the call.
Yeah.
You may even decide that for whatever reason you want to be somewhere else, but that's a call you should take. And if you were to come to Sewanee, I would be able to advise you on that sort of life advice. Good luck getting that advice elsewhere.
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
Where do you target recruits? I mean, is it geographic, or is it the type of student, or they've already applied here? Or where do you find them?
Sure. I'm going to let Mark get more details on that. But I will say this. One of my, first of all, I love Sewanee. I love Sewanee. I'm going to say it a 3rd time so you believe me. I love Sewanee. The reason I say that is that anytime somebody asks me a question and I have to give a little bit of information that suggests we should be doing better in some ways, people are like, oh, the Vice Chancellor hates the University of the South. How could you possibly say this? I'm saying this because I'm calling us all to get better. So with that said, let me give you this data. We recruit 80%, 80% of our total undergraduate student body from 1/5 of our feeder high schools. Let's say that again. 80% of all of our undergraduates come from 20% of the schools that we recruit from. Which means, in an environment of higher education was getting increasingly more competitive, objectively speaking, we need to do a better job, to your point, of reaching out to tell the story of Sewanee, to encourage young people to come. And so, both with our admission staff and our academic recruitment staff, we're going to be focusing on spreading the message broader than we have been doing in the last, whatever, number of years. So let me ask Mark to talk a bit more about that.
Thank you. Yeah, and let me just say this, last year was the best recruiting year we've had in my 26 years on the mountain. I mean, in terms of numbers and quality, and we were really, really pleased with our freshman class. Historically, we have really drawn a line from Baltimore to Dallas or San Antonio and kind of southeast of there. That's where we've recruited. When we used to meet 100% need years ago, and things, you know, we had a 6-4 football team, and we were disappointed at that. Then we went to gapping, and it was a little bit more of a struggle. And now we've gone back to meeting 100% need, and that's opened up a lot of areas for us. We have to go national and maybe global in some sports if we can. And I don't know if you kept track of the news and about the demographic shift that's going to be happening over the next 4 or 5 years. And also, even as recently as last week in the Wall Street Journal, the Post, and I think also the Chronicle of Higher Education, they talked about fewer young men going to college. And so we have to beat the bushes wherever we can in whatever state, whatever country, to bring in the right students to the University of the South. And with that means more multiculturalism, it means socioeconomic diversity, just however we can make this happen. We need to continue to bring in the right students for the university. Did that help? Okay.
Tommy, let me say, my son dates the catcher on the softball team, and she is from Whidbey Island, off the coast of Washington State. And I asked her how she got here, and she said she had had an Episcopal minister on the mainland where they went back and forth with the ferry and everything, and just asked her to look at it, and it was not in her top 5 whatsoever. But once she got an opportunity to come here and visit, as we know, you know, the domain sells itself. It sells itself. But I just want to make that point. I'm seeing people, Mark, come from Minnesota now, and football team looks like it's got pretty good range of folks too. Whidbey Island, I mean, wow.
Yeah, so just one quick comment. The average GPA for the football freshman this year was 3.8. And Alan Ramirez, our new Dean of Admissions, thank you, visited with our coaches Wednesday, and it's great to have him come over anytime he wants. But he says, you know, that's awesome, but let's keep edging that thing up to 4.0. So we're looking for that high academic profile individual.
And let me say this as well, getting back to recruitment. So this year's freshman class is comprised of 42% recruited athletes. It's the most in the history of the University of the South. And as I said, I love athletics. I'd love to see that number be 50. Because we know that athletics as a general proposition, all things being equal, are very good for the students, and it's very good for the student body school. Sir, in the very back, welcome. Yes, sir.
Mark Webb, how are you? Mr. Webb?
Yes.
All right, good to see you.
Great.
Thanks for attending the field hockey game this week. I wanted to touch on that. The Sewanee field hockey team played a team of adults from Nashville, the Nashville field hockey team, which the only thing it shines a light on, the beauty of D3. I think Division III athletics is so much more healthy than D1. I think D1 is going on a course of self-destruction. I think it's big business, how they've incorporated gambling into everything. It's a frightening story that's going to unfold, I believe. Anyway, Mark Webb, here is just a team from Nashville. Mark Webb attends the game just to see. Part of the reason, there was 2 alumni playing on the Nashville team. And that tells you, I think, the beauty of what you were saying, the Naval Academy, introducing so many students to athletics, how it stays with them throughout their life. They fall in love with competing, with the camaraderie, and it's a wonderful thing. And I think that's what Mark Webb has been able to provide through this program, and it stays with the students for such a long time.
Yeah, here. And you know, I've said this to Mark. You know, we haven't started our next fundraising campaign yet, and we will in due course. But outside of scholarships, which is always the #1 fundraising goal, the #2 will be dedicated to athletics, so that we can raise the money to fully refurbish our athletic facilities and ensure that Sewanee is a destination place for student athletes across the board. And so I'm looking forward to that next phase of our team. Yes, sir.
Do you, back to recruitment, do y'all have an active relationship with the National Association of Episcopal Schools as a means of, as a vehicle to recruit with?
We do have an active association institutionally. I don't know the extent to which NAS is, our relationship has actually translated into athletic recruitment. Mark, maybe you know, but I'm not sure. But we are constantly kind of, I've actually spoken a couple of times the last year just in terms of generally speaking.
I know they had annual meetings, and it seemed that to go there and give a pitch for Sewanee might help broaden your appeal across the nation.
Sure. You know, and so I think about this in a couple of different ways. So first of all, Sewanee is, has been, and will always remain an Episcopal school. It is at the core of our identity. It is, as I like to say, it is the starting point by which we engage on all other matters of ethics and faith life and whatever else. Doesn't mean you have to be Episcopal to come here. I am not. I'm a Presbyterian. But it does mean that like that is our starting point. And to your point, it actually gives us, just like this young lady from Whidbey Island, it gives us sort of an entry point for us to engage. And there are other entry points that we, as Mark said, because of what we're seeing in terms of the decrease of 18-year-olds across the country. We also have to find other routes to engage other communities that may not be affiliated with the Episcopal faith or Episcopal traditions. And so it's not an either-or proposition. It is both and. We will always remain an Episcopal school. It will always be the founding portion of our identity. And who else can we invite to be part of this glorious community? Yes, sir. Yes, sir, please.
Just a comment. I just want to say how much progress we've made since the 60s when I was a student. We had, I tell some of these young men that complain, but no women, no cars, no diversity, bad weather, bad food, required chapel, and the draft hanging over you, which was my first introduction to the job. So, now I want to say you inherited a real challenging situation and handled it well.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Most of these guys, when I tell them that, they say, "What do you mean no women?"
You know, it's interesting. I appreciate all that. So I keep a laminated quote from George Fairbanks on my desk. You may recall George Fairbanks, kind of the first resident, sort of effectively director of the University of the South. It is a quote from him from 1901, in which he is railing against the introduction of automobiles on the domain, and said that it must be resisted at all costs, that the introduction of automobiles will yield to the moral degradation of our student body and the destruction that is all great and good about the University of the South. The reason I keep that quote on my desk is we have automobiles now. But you know, one of the, as I said before, I went to the U.S. Naval Academy, and one of the great things about Annapolis is that it is constantly interrogating the balance between tradition on the one hand and innovation on the other. The mission of the United States Naval Academy is verbatim exactly the same today as it was when Secretary of the Navy George Bancroft wrote it in 1845 with orders to go forth and found a naval school. From the age of sail to the age of space, it continues to animate the direction of the institution. And yet, the institution has evolved dramatically. To your point, in terms of who gets to go, both in terms of women and ethnic minorities who are crushing it there, to the nature of the academic offerings, the nature of how it interprets that mission for the 21st century. And so, as I lead Sewanee, I would like for us to continue that exercise. What is the appropriate balance between tradition on the one hand and innovation on the other? What are those things, like our Episcopal faith, like our Downey, like the sense of community, that have to be preserved and extended? And what are those things that we need to innovate in order to ensure that we are delivering not only quality education, but also a wholesome communal environment that is welcoming and supportive of all going into the 21st century? Yes, sir.
I'm a proponent of Plato's Academy, what you experienced in Annapolis in terms of the total person.
Yes.
One of the things that I see missing and I would like to see considered would be that approach to Sewanee. It may not be possible, but as I walk by the Wellness Center and I don't see anybody doing
physical activities to a larger degree. Would it ever be possible to add that component outside of athletics for the other students?
Sure. Well, you know, again, on this question of tradition versus innovation, one of the things, there are two things that are true for purpose of this discussion as it relates to the university itself. As a liberal arts institution, we offer a wide variety of curricular and co-curricular opportunities to develop yourself as a person. The second thing that is true is that outside of the core academic requirements, virtually none of it is mandatory. You don't have to do anything. If you don't want to develop yourself physically, if you aren't particularly interested in the development of your moral character, if you aren't particularly interested in engaging in the community, you don't have to do anything. And that cuts both ways. On the one hand, we are saying you are a free adult to choose your life as you want. On the other hand, we are also saying that without these sorts of compulsory requirements, institutionally, we are not taking an affirmative position of what it means to be a graduate of the university itself. For example, as was said, when you were here in the 60s before chapel was mandatory, we are not going to mandate chapel again for all kinds of constitutional reasons. But the reason it was mandated before is because it was presumed that if you were going to be a student or graduate of the University of the South, the institution had something to say about your moral development. When my father went to Morehouse in the 1960s, chapel was required there. At the Naval Academy, chapel used to be required. As I mentioned, for constitutional reasons, we're not going to require any of that, but I do think, to your point, it's worth asking the question. What do we want a Sewanee graduate to look like? What do we think are the baseline attributes beyond simply the matriculation of a particular academic course that are essential to being a graduate of the university itself? And having answered that question institutionally, what steps are we taking in order to make sure that's happening? So that's a conversation that we're going to be having. And I don't know what the end line is going to be, but I do know that the time is right for us to have that conversation as a community. Bill.
Taking that one step further, I know in advance of 2026, you obviously want to see our ranking with the U.S. News and World Report improving.
Right.
And one of those issues was our acceptance rate.
Right.
Can you tell us what that was this last year and what areas you're working on right now to improve our ranking?
Sure. Well, let me take a step back and say, and kind of give you some background for those who may not be familiar. So, unless you are obsessed with higher education, like my job requires me to be, you may not be tracking the data that I'm about to tell you. So, basically, people stopped having babies at the same rate during the 2008 financial crisis. Those babies will turn 18 in the year 2026, which is tomorrow. It will be at least 15% smaller than previous cohorts of 18-year-olds in the last several decades. And that's all 18-year-olds. When you extrapolate from that those that are likely to go to college, you're looking at a national pool of college-bound 18-year-olds that could be as much as 20% smaller than previous decades, and that will remain that small for the foreseeable future. Which means that the same 3,000 institutions of higher education are going to be competing for a national pool that's at least 20% smaller. The best education policy experts tell us that the top 50 schools by category, more or less, top small liberal arts colleges, top four-year public institutions, top four-year privates like the Ivies, the top 50-ish will be fine. Everybody else will be in a knife fight. And there will be institutions of higher education that will not make it to the other side of this so-called demographic cliff. There are already some that are folding already that have been victims of COVID. Remember I told you, I love Sewanee. I love Sewanee. Saying it for a third time to make sure you know, I love Sewanee. And here's some tough information. Our U.S. News and World Report ranking has dropped from a high of 23 in 1998 to the number 47 last year. And it has been a straight line decline. Number 47 is a very dangerous place to be, given all the information I just told you. When you extrapolate the data about why our ranking is slipped, there are some ways in which we're doing really quite well. Alumni engagement, small class sizes, donor engagement, all those sorts of things. There are other areas in which we are challenged, and they all have to do with student success. So our ability to the overall aggregate quality of the classes we've been admitting, our ability to retain students from the first to second year, our ability to graduate students within 4 years. On each of those individual categories, although our overall ranking is number 47, in those categories we are somewhere between number 65 and number 80. Now, I believe with our faith background, with our strong liberal arts training, with the strength of our community, we have the wherewithal to confront these hard issues and to face them head on, as you do on the athletic field, with the will to win. Accordingly, we have 3 foci strategically that we are addressing to face this issue. The first is to focus like a laser beam on student success. The second is to focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. The third is to focus on alternative sources of revenue. I'm going to explain each of those 3 in turn. First, student success. I just mentioned to you that all 3 of those data are issues where we are struggling. The aggregate quality of our incoming classes, our ability to retain students, our ability to graduate them within 4 years. Up until recently, there was never anybody on staff that you could point to and say, you are responsible for aggregate approaches to address these matters of student success. Last year, we hired our first ever Vice Provost for Student Success, Dr. Lisa Stevenson, who I personally recruited from George Washington University, to craft interventions based on data to address each of those issues. The second is with regard to diversity, equity, and inclusion. As I mentioned to you, we're going to see a dramatic decrease in the percentage of 18-year-olds going to college. In addition, the other salient fact behind that is that it's going to be the most diverse group of young people going to college in the history of the United States of America. As we sit here today, there is no longer a majority ethnic group amongst young people under the age of 17. Or to put it differently, as far as the future of higher education is concerned, the future of a majority minority America is here now. And the University of the South, 50 years after Nathaniel Bubba Owens graduated from here, remains 90% white amongst American undergraduates. And so, the other really important point is that every other liberal arts college in the top 50 has solved for this problem. No other liberal arts institution has an undergraduate demography that looks like ours. And so we have to figure out, on the context of a shrinking national pool that is going to be more diverse than ever, how do we recruit more and better students that are increasingly diverse to come to the University of the South? Simple, right? That's the task. The third issue is that we have to generate alternative sources of revenue. So we are not simply a small liberal arts college like a lot of our peers. We are also a municipality with our own fire department and police department. We're also a state park with 13,000 acres where people come to hike and bike and swim and fish. We're a country club also, with one of the best 9-hole golf courses in the world and all the ancillary services that go with that. All of those things cost money. 80 cents out of every dollar we spend on everything comes from undergraduate tuition fees. And in the context, as I said, of a shrinking national pool of undergraduates going to college, we have to find other sources of revenue to be able to support that diversity of activities and to be able to pour back into our academic activities. So that's the 3-pronged strategy. I could talk for hours about more details about how we're going about it, but that's the issue set. And as it relates specifically to recruitment and retention, we are focused like a laser beam because that is essentially the core of what we're all here to do. Jimmy?
Saw through Facebook or Instagram, you got on the road, like you were in DC.
Yes.
Is that your first, I guess, Sewanee alumni function?
It is my first Sewanee alumni function outside of Sewanee. I
Right.
did speak to the Sewanee Alumni Club of Sewanee, which is the Sewaneeest of Sewanee alumni clubs anywhere outside of Sewanee. A couple of weeks ago, it was great.
Yeah.
I sit on the board of the National Endowment for Democracy. And we had a board meeting in Washington, and so we took the occasion for my attendance at that board meeting to be a host of Sewanee alumni events in the Washington, D.C. area. We had a great meeting of the Sewanee Alumni Club in Washington, D.C. at the Meridian International Center. I did a number of other lunches and coffees with groups of alumni and a few one-on-ones as well.
Well, and just to follow up if I could, I'm impressed, and I've heard you say it several times, that the next campaign for dollars, after focusing on, I guess, the endowment, will be with athletics. The students and athletes nowadays, you just have to go to Rhodes where you walk into the locker room and it's donated by Fred Smith and that'll express. Kids nowadays, whether they're in D1, 2, or 3, are impressed. We've got the mountain and the natural beauty and everything, but I just want to, I'm not pinning you down, but I'm just saying we are going to take a look at, and the capital campaign is the word I'm trying to say, as far as our facilities are concerned. We've done it on the baseball field, we've done it in several other areas, and equestrian, I don't think we have anybody that could compare with us. But I'm just, I know from various alumni, and I'm like you, Don, I came here the first year of women. The facilities have improved dramatically, but do you have an idea, I guess, where I'm getting around to my point, when that campaign, I know everybody's tired at the Stronger, Truer, Sewanee, you can't go to the well too many times, got to give everybody a little break. I'm not trying to pin you down. Do you have a general idea of when that's going to start? And I guess that's my question.
Sure. Sometime after your day, but before the end of my tenure.
Okay.
Pins it down.
Yeah, I did. You didn't let me pin you down.
I mean, so in all seriousness, the short answer is, as you know, beloved Jay Fisher, who ran the last campaign,
right.
Stepped down as vice president of university relations. We are have hired a new vice president of university
right.
relations, a wonderful woman named Debbie Vaughn that I'm very excited about. She starts October 1st, so the campaign can't start before October 2nd. It's going to take her a minute to sort of get through, and then we'll have consultations, and then at some point thereafter we will start. So
well, I think that Bill and I, as athletes, when we played here, I can mark, Dan, y'all know how well I think participation is in YSR, particularly from former athletes, and I can tell you that I didn't give in Stronger, Truer, wanting just, to see it go to athletics, but I believe, and this won't be a surprise to you, I don't think, or anybody in this room, if you say that that's going to be the second priority, I have a hunch that if the more specific you can be about it, as far as maybe a football, we're football and lacrosse out to share, a locker room, I'm just using an example, but the more specific you could be about it, I think that would, get people checked on that.
well, I told Mark to give me a wish list. Yes?
Yes,
Yes.
yes, sir, absolutely.
And we will match that wish list against, what we think the overall campaign goals are, and do our best to get it. Thank you.
And,
Sir.
when you were talking about athletics and that we have a long history of standard intercollegiate athletics and stuff. I mean, when I was working with the university, I coached the canoe team, and I coached the women's soccer team before it became, when it was a club, before it became a NCAA sport. And I see that still happening. A group of students have just called me and said, we're forming a whitewater club. Please come help us. And I think, letting the students, as diversity and all happens, they're going to be new ways that they're going to express their athleticism. And I think to continue to be welcoming to that is an important part.
Absolutely. You know, I recently entertained, here on the domain this summer, the president of Morehouse College, my father's alma mater. And he told me that Morehouse College in Atlanta, Metro Atlanta, has a polo team. Because several years ago, they had a young man who was interested in Morehouse, who played polo. And his mother asked, "Do you have polo?" And the president said no. So she bought them a polo team. And so now you have young men who experience polo, and obviously, you know, most, I'm going to question you, I don't play polo. A lot of young folks who've never played polo before, and they go and they play polo. So if anybody wants to form a polo team at Sewanee, I know there is one team that we can compete against. And to your point, when it's whitewater rafting or just trap and ski or other sorts of things, I mean, if there's an option that makes sense and we can support it, I am all about it. Absolutely.
We've got horses.
We do, and I've actually told Kareem that it is unlikely in the history, the future of the University of South, that you're ever going to have a vice chancellor who is as passionate about equestrian sports as you currently have. So you need to take advantage of it. So we'll see. Yeah.
Anything else? Thank you, sir.
Pleasure. Thank you.
We appreciate it very much. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the YSR Club. Please, please, please join the YSR, and because the money does go a long way to help our teams. I understand that there's been a $25,000 challenge posted that will meet your donations also for the documentary about the 1899 football team. And we just happen to have a Ironman poster. Jimmy still has posters here, I assume, and that we can get all this done.
Blasted sun wouldn't be in the way.
Good benefit from it for
My chance, if you don't mind, the second one, this is the one actually in the chapel, Vice Chancellor, that they've done. That's beautiful.
There we go.
Yeah.
Anyhow, we have opportunities to help the university in more ways than one, and we appreciate it. Now, next week, we will have the head volleyball coach, Nancy Muller, here to talk about volleyball. As Mark alluded, they've lost 2 tough matches that my wife and I both watched from beginning to end, and come out and support the athletes. They deserve it. They really do. They work hard, they practice hard, they play hard. I didn't see any quit in the volleyball team at all, although they were down, I think, 2-0 in one match. Or anyhow, come watch them. They're good, and all the other teams are. Thank you. Have a good week, and YSR.
YSR.